What's going on, my homies? Jolt here from TheTokenMinorities, and I am back with the draft analysis for your KC Jirachiefs in the GBA Season 9. Now, as I'm sure you guys are probably aware at this point, the GBA is going to be playing Let's Go, Pikachu, and Eevee for this season. Now, I am also aware that I know a lot of you guys maybe aren't too fond of the idea that the GBA is going to be playing Let's Go for this season. I've kind of heard it or seen it in the comments. I've also kind of heard it around the community as well in a variety of groups. Now, I just want to be straight with you guys. I also am a little bit skeptical about this season. I don't think Let's Go is the most competitive format or really competitive at all when it comes to draft format. I'm just going to be straightforward and honest with you guys, but I think the format can be a little bit more competitive based upon how the GBA is structured this season. Now, let me explain that for you. So basically, in case you guys haven't seen already, basically we're going to be playing best of 3 throughout the season. We're going to be bringing 6 Pokemon to every matchup, but only picking 4 of those Pokemon, kind of similar to Battle Spot style, if you happen to have played that in the past, where you're only picking some of your Pokemon for each of the games. So we're going to be having a best of 3 series. You bring 6 to the matchup, you pick 4 of those Pokemon for each of your games in the best of 3 series, and then best 2 out of 3 determines the winners. So the reason why I feel that makes this format a little bit more competitive is because you can get into your opponent's head with the way you're playing the game, with how you reveal or conceal the moves that you bring on your Pokemon, and I just think that you can go into a little bit more strategic detail on your team building before you enter the actual battle when you're preparing for a best of 3 scenario as opposed to just preparing for a single matchup. Now, in my opinion, I think that kind of helps cancel out the fact that there aren't going to be EVs. There's not going to be held items or abilities on the Pokemon. That does kind of suck in terms of you know, building complex team structures, but I feel like having the ability to prep for a best 2 out of 3 scenario does make it a little bit more exciting, at least, and I'll try to really explain my thought process to you guys throughout the season on how I'm approaching the best 2 out of 3 style of building, just so that there's something, you know, I feel like I can teach you guys can maybe learn from, and maybe even have a little bit of fun in your own Let's Go leagues. I know a lot of you guys probably aren't going to have that opportunity, but you know, I think it could be pretty fun overall. So anyway, just wanted to kind of throw that out there so you guys know where I stand entering this season and how I'm going to try to make this a little bit more of a competitive experience for you guys or an enjoyable and competitive experience for you guys to watch throughout the season. So with all of that out of the way, we can talk a little bit about the draft here. So because we're playing in Let's Go, obviously this is a Kanto metagame. There's not very many Pokemon that are available, and there's also some of those Pokemon that are going to end up getting banned because they are simply too good when there's limited checks and counters to them. Stuff like Mewtwo, Mew, those are both obviously gone. Melmetal gone, best steel type by far in the format. Mega Alakazam, regular Alakazam, both gone. Very strong, very fast. There's just not very many counters to them. One of the counters was Melmetal, and with that being banned, the only other true counter to the Zams was really Alolan Muck. And there's only one Alolan Muck, obviously, in the entire draft pool, which is different than what you would see on the ladder, where, you know, every single team can have an Alolan Muck. So, yeah, the Mega Alakazam and Alakazam Mega Gengar, all those gone. There's just not enough responses to them. And the starters, I believe, were also banned. Starter Eevee, starter Pikachu, just due to accessibility. But, yeah, I think that was it for the bans. But what I wanted to say, I guess, before I jump into the actual team here that I drafted, just kind of my thought process going into the draft. So I think the best Pokemon that can be picked up for this metagame are Pokemon that are fast, first and foremost. There's a reason why Mega Aerodactyl is incredible in the format. There's a reason why Joey picked that up #1 overall. It's fast, it's got good offenses, and bulk, it's just really good. But most important of all, it is very fast. And that's because in Let's Go there is no held items, meaning there is no choice scarf. So the fastest Pokemon, the fastest base stat on your team is going to probably be the fastest Pokemon you're going to have for the entire game. And if you have the fastest Pokemon in the entire matchup, it's going to be the fastest Pokemon in the entire game. So pretty much for the entire game as well. So speed is really, really important, and you kind of saw that as a little bit of a trend with the early draft picks that got selected. Mega Arrows, Gengar, Starmie, even Zapdos relatively fast. Those are 4 of the first 6 mons that were drafted, and that's primarily because they are fast and strong. We also saw Mega Garra and Mega Venusaur go pretty early as well, because there is kind of a limited selection of Mega Evolutions, so it definitely made sense for those Pokemon to go, and they're also 2 of the better defensive Pokemon, or even just kind of bulky tanks that would have been available. But anyways, so fast Pokemon are really good. I think that Pokemon who have priority are really good, particularly like stronger priority, maybe stat boosted priority, or having access to agility. Both of those are really important as well, just because they are a means of speed control, which again is so important in the Let's Go metagame, especially for draft format. Then the only other thing I wanted to mention is that Pokemon who are bulky and strong, that combination is really potent as well, because basically how this format's going to work is that you want to basically kill 1 more Pokemon than your opponent does. If you have 1 Pokemon that can kill 2 of your opponent's Pokemon, you are in a really good spot. And bulky Pokemon are going to be pretty good at that if they also have a little bit of offensive prowess as well. So those are the 3, or I guess the 4 factors that I'm really looking for the Pokemon that I'm drafting here for my team. So with all of that out of the way, finally, we can go ahead and jump on into my first pick for my draft, and that is regular Aerodactyl. Now, regular Aerodactyl, obviously a downgrade from Mega Arrow, which also went in round 1, but let's be real, it's still one of the absolute best Pokemon I could have possibly had in my draft position. I was number 7 overall, and pretty much all the mons that went before me I would have taken before regular Aerodactyl, but unfortunately they were all taken here. So I think the 6 guys in front of me did a great job with their first pick here in the draft, but I felt Aerodactyl was the best mon available on the board. Obviously it's really fast, base 130 speed, I believe. It's not going to be outsped by much at all, and it's also just really good utility. It has access to Roost, and with Rest being banned in the GBA, recovery of any sort is going to be really valuable, I feel. And Aerodactyl does have the typing to kind of take advantage of the having the option to recover with Roost. So having recovery is nice. It's also a stealth rocker, pretty much a guaranteed stealth rocker, if that's what I want to do with it in a given matchup. Rocks aren't going to be quite as valuable in a 4v4 setting as opposed to a 6v6 setting, but I still think in some situations I will want to have Stealth Rock, and Aerodactyl is going to be one of the best setters of that. But most importantly, of course, is that speed stat. Being able to outspeed so many things makes it a really good revenge killer, potentially a really good cleaner in the late game. Unfortunately, I don't think it gets Hone Claws or any other setup options, maybe agility, so it's not going to necessarily be a setup threat, but I think it's still going to be solid utility, also having Taunt to deny opposing Stealth Rockers as well, and just good general coverage. Rock Slide, Earthquake, I think it also gets Crunch and Fire coverage. It gets a lot of, it gets the coverage that it needs, Wing Attack as well, I guess, to be an effective threat. So sure, it's not as good as Mega Arrow, but it is absolutely a round 1 worthy Pokemon, and one that I think I can build my team around. So next up in my round 2 slot, I actually decided to pick up Mega Kangaskhan. Again, I felt like this was the best mon available on the draft board, and I think people really slept on it. I think it probably should have gone earlier. It still has, despite losing Parental Bond, it still has a very high base attack stat. I believe it's base 120? It might be a little higher. I'm just doing this off the top of my head. I think it's base 120 attack, and still has base 100 speed, and ridiculously good bulk. It's going to be able to take any hit, just like I was kind of mentioning before. It's going to be able to take any hit and probably retaliate with a KO, or at least retaliate with doing serious damage to whatever it was that tried to attack me. And most Pokemon are actually going to be below base 100 in this metagame, which means that this is all the more of a threat. It also has access to Sucker Punch and Fake Out, two very strong priority options, Fake Out being stab boosted, Sucker Punch not being stab boosted, but it's still a little bit stronger for a priority option. So this is going to really serve two of those roles that I mentioned earlier, and it's actually kind of fast, like I kind of alluded to, base 100s being pretty solid in terms of a speed tier here for this metagame. So Mega Kangaskhan really is the full package here, and I'm excited to see what it can do. It doesn't have the best normal stat. That's probably where it got hurt the most. Besides Parental Bond, I suppose. That's probably where it got nerfed the most in Let's Go, but even so, it does still have decent normal stab options and still has a very large amount of coverage options. I believe it gets all the elemental punches, Rock Slide, Earthquake. I think it gets Crunch as well. It has a lot that it can do, and that's not even considering the fact that it has those priority options as well. So Mega Kang really is the real deal, and I felt like the combination Aerodactyl Mega Kangaskhan would be reliable offense that I could bring pretty much every single week throughout the season and just apply a lot of physical offensive pressure against my opponents. So those are my first two Pokemon for the team. Next up, I picked a bit of a niche Pokemon. Now, I was kind of looking at all the drafts so far and trying to figure out what my opponents, my future opponents or I guess what their best Pokemon are going to be weak to, like what types those Pokemon are going to be weak to. And it just so happens that the vast majority of the coaches at this point had picked two Pokemon who did not at all appreciate the combination of electric and psychic coverage. Now, psychic types are going to be really good here. Melmetal is gone. There's only one Alolan Muck. Most dark types are simply not very good in this format, in the Let's Go format. They're just not strong Pokemon, and even the steel types honestly aren't the best either. So really, there's just not very many good steel types. There's like Magneton, there's Alolan Dougie, and Alolan Sandslash. That might be it. There's just not very many steel types. So psychic types are just really good. That's all I'm saying here. And as a result, I wanted to make sure I got a good one, and this was definitely the one that seemed to look the best on paper against all the other teams at this point, and that is Alolan Raichu. So Alolan Raichu is obviously not the strongest Pokemon in the world from a base stat perspective. It only has like base 95, 90, something like that special attack. Still base 110 speed, so again, speed, very important. It also has Fake Out, I believe, so it does have a priority option. But the combination of Thunderbolt and Psychic does a number to pretty much every single team in the league, especially the high tier picks that everyone has taken here at this point in the draft. So I felt like this would really apply a lot of pressure to the Pokemon who I would consider to be the biggest threats on the opposing teams here in my matchup. So this is really, I guess, what I would call kind of an anti-meta pick, in the sense that it does match up well against the best Pokemon on everyone else's teams. And quite frankly, in Let's Go, the best Pokemon are like so many levels above the rest. When you look at the drafts, like the first 2 or 3 picks on everyone's team are significantly better than everything below them, just because of how the draft was structured and really the lack of available mons. So I just think Alolan Raichu is going to be really solid for my team, despite the kind of lower special attack stat for being an offensive Pokemon. I just think its typing, its stabs are going to really come in clutch here for my team. Also has access to Calm Mind, which is a new tool, a new trick that I can use with Alolan Raichu throughout the season. Don't think it's had Calm Mind in the past. I think it's only had Nasty Plot, so Calm Mind does have a lot of benefits in this type of meta, in my opinion. So we'll just have to see how I'm able to implement that throughout the season. So now with those 3 mons intact, I have a lot of offense. I need to start patching some holes because I'm not going to be the fastest team guaranteed, right? I have something like Aerodactyl. There are Pokemon that can outspeed Aerodactyl. Alolan Raichu is going to outspeed most things. It's not going to outspeed everything, and I don't want to be switching Mega Kangaskhan into every offensive threat I can't outspeed. So I need to have some fatter mons that are going to be able to be my defensive backbone for my team whenever push comes to shove. So I'm going to end up picking my bulky water next. Now, there's so many water types in Kanto. There's so many water types, but I wanted to make sure that I had one that could deal with the fastest and strongest physical and special threats in Kanto. Now, no one Pokemon can do all that, unfortunately. No one Pokemon can do all that, but there is one bulky water especially that can take hits from pretty much all of the faster threats, save electric types, Encanto, and that is Blastoise. Now, Blastoise is pretty much going to do what Blastoise has always done, minus Rapid Spin. It can't Rapid Spin. There is no spinning or defogging in Let's Go, but fortunately it's 4v4. Hopefully rocks won't be a thing I have to worry about too much. I don't think my team's overall that weak to rocks anyways. It doesn't really appreciate them, but it doesn't really hate them either. So, so Blastoise is going to be able to take those hits pretty well. It does have pretty good coverage, just like it always has. I believe it gets Dark Pulse. I think it still gets Dragon Pulse, still has Ice Beam, Scald, Hydro. He has a lot of good options. Also Aqua Jet if I need to pick something off with priority. So I have now 3 Pokemon with priority, and I really do think priority is going to be key for this season. So it's just meant to be the standard bulky water. There's really not much else to say on Blastoise. You should already know what it can do at this point, and it's honestly simplified a little bit in Let's Go, as you would expect. But either way, I think it's one of the best bulky waters, definitely behind Mega Gyarados. Off the top of my head, there might not be a better bulky water. Starmie. I think Starmie's a better bulky water. That might be the only 2 bulky waters that are better than Blastoise in my opinion. So yeah, I'm really excited to see how it does this season. I think it'll really serve the role well that I need it to serve, and it's another one of those Pokemon that it should be able to bring pretty much any week to take hits, to sponge hits, and maybe get some damage off in return in the process. So now, with those 4 mons out of the way, we can start moving into more of the kind of the bottom tier mons that I had to pick up. 4 rounds in, there really weren't too many good Pokemon left, so I guess bear with me on these last picks. I kind of did the best I could on these, but given what was available. Those first 4 Pokemon, though, I'm really happy with. I think they can really carry the team throughout the season. But next up, I'm going to pick up a Dragon Resist, because there's only a few Steel types. There's like 3 Steel types, and there's like 3 Fairies. There are just not very many Dragon Resists, and I do not want to be Outrage fodder versus potential Mega Charizard X or versus Dragonite. So I'm going to pick up a Fairy, and it's going to be Wigglytuff. Now, Wigglytuff, not the best Pokemon overall, but it is an essential role for my team, as I have already mentioned. It has some pretty cool utility options as well, I feel. It has access to dual screens, which I could easily see being really helpful here in Let's Go, because there is no defog. The only way to get rid of dual screens is by Brick Break, which not every team is going to have access to. So I could easily see dual screens as a viable option. It also has access to Stealth Rock. It has access to Teleport for slow momentum if I need it to, as well as just a variety of coverage moves. It really has pretty good coverage. I think it gets T-Bolt, Ice Beam, and Flamethrower if I recall correctly. It gets T-Wave as well. It gets Dazzling Gleam. It has a lot of options that it can work with. It's not going to be very strong. It doesn't get like Calm Mind or Nasty Plot, so that part kind of sucks, but it's still going to serve the role that I need my Fairy to serve. It's going to be able to check the Dragon types, or at least make them think twice about clicking something like Outrage, okay? So that's the idea behind Wigglytuff, simply there to make sure I have a response to outraging dragons if I have to, and I didn't want to let this slide and potentially not have a response to dragons at all later on. So yep, that's Wigglytuff. And next up is one of the fastest Pokemon that was remaining on the board in round 6, and that is Rapidash. Now, I've actually had Rapidash once in the past, but way back in the PPL when I played in that league, probably, gosh, like a year and a half ago, maybe 2, and I kind of liked it then, honestly, and I think it's going to kind of fill a similar role on this team as it did way back then as well. It's still fast, it's still a good offensive fire, and it has some decent coverage. It's still going to be hard-walled by certain Pokemon that have always been able to hard-wall Rapidash, but that doesn't mean I can't use that turn effectively doing something like, I don't know, Toxicking it or Will-O-Wisping it. I think burns are really important in this format as well. And it also has access to Sub and Agility as well if I want to make this more of a late game sweeper. Unfortunately, I can't Baton Pass an Agility or a Sub. I wish it still got Baton Pass, but unfortunately it's not going to be an option here. But yeah, it's a Rapidash. There's not a whole lot else I can really say about it. It's a good offensive fire. It's got a nice 105 base speed, which will be able to outpace the vast majority of Pokemon that I will encounter. And access to Flare Blitz is still pretty nice. It has base 100 attack, I believe. That's going to hit pretty hard. Most things are going to appreciate taking that Flare Blitz unless it is resisted. So yeah, it's a mon that I could easily see myself bringing frequently throughout the season, and I'm excited to see how it does. So next up in round round 7. We're really starting to pick from the garbage at this point. I decided to go with Hitmonchan for my round 7 pick. I was kind of debating between that and something like Vileplume, just to have an extra water resist for my team. But I went with Hitmonchan because it is a setup threat. I thought it could do a little bit more for my team than Vileplume would have. I don't really know if I would have brought Vileplume very often, to be honest. And Hitmonchan is able to be a pretty big threat with a combination bulk up and agility, and having a variety of coverage. I think it has all the elemental punches. That still has fighting coverage. Unfortunately, it doesn't get close combat, but it still has, I think Brick Break is probably its strongest fighting move, so not the strongest one in the world, obviously, but it's still going to be stab boosted. It's still going to be good against opposing normal types, and it's just going to be a good general stab for Hitmonchan. So we'll see how it goes. I think it still is going to, it's going to be kind of a niche Pokemon. It'll be good in certain matchups. It'll be awful in other matchups, and obviously we're just going to bring it to the good matchups, and I think the rest of my team can carry if I can't bring Hitmonchan to a certain game. So anyway, I think it's going to be pretty good, and we'll just see how that goes. And then finally, I am going to pick up my Marowak here in my last round. This is probably the last ground type that was available on the board. I did not prioritize a ground type for my draft, and that is because I don't think ground types need to be prioritized in Let's Go. Volt Switch is not a move, so I don't think it's essential to have a way to stop Volt Switch anymore. And yeah, when you don't, I guess like the main reason why you want Marowak is for the faster electrics, or you want a ground type is for the faster electrics like a Jolteon or a Zapdos, and it's going to be good against those Pokemon no matter what ground type it is. It really doesn't matter to me what my ground type is, as long as I have a way to force those Pokemon to run some other type of move besides electric coverage. So it's going to serve that role pretty well. Marowak is not very strong by its base stats. It doesn't have access to Fit Club anymore, which was the real reason why Marowak was viable in previous games. But I think given the fact that it was round 8, and given the fact that it was probably the last ground type on the board, and given the benefits of having a ground type on my team, I think it's a solid pickup here at this stage in the draft, just given the utility it's going to be able to provide for my team. It does still have access to Swords Dance as well, so it is a setup option. It also has Stealth Rock. Wigglytuff also has Stealth Rock. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. So I do have 3 Rockers on my team, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, so Marowak, basically the dedicated electric check, also is a nice check to rock types if I feel like I need to have that as well. Hitmonchan can kind of do that too, but Marowak would be a little bit better at that because of its higher defenses. So that is the team for your KC Jirachiefs this season of the GBA. Make sure to let me know what you think about the team in the comments below. And yeah, we'll just kind of see how this season goes. Again, I totally understand if you're a little bit skeptical about the season. Again, I agree with you. I am too. But I think there's some things we can do to make this season feel a little bit more competitive. I'm definitely going to still treat it like a competitive season. My content's still going to be competitive, so I hope you guys will be able to enjoy that as well. Maybe learn a thing or two as well from the whole approach to a best 2 out of 3 matchup. That's really what I'm going to consider the most competitive aspect of this season, the best 2 out of 3 matchup. So yeah, I think that's about all I have to say for this. I'm not exactly sure when the week 1 matchups are going to go live. I think it might be this weekend. If not this weekend, hopefully the next. Basically, we're having issues getting our teams genned because of patches or something, and I don't exactly know how all that works. I never gen my own teams, but basically there's potentially a delay in the week 1. We'll just kind of see what happens on that. But if things go according to plan, hopefully you'll be able to see my week 1 matchup against Gym Leader Geo and the San Francisco Giants this coming Sunday, so be on the lookout for that. And I'll probably do a little team builder of sorts before the battle goes up as well. So I think that is about all I have to say for this video. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace.